are water temperature, salinity, pH, dissolved oxygen, and turbidity. And the salinity changes and temperature changes go from surface to benthic, and it all depends on the currents and the depth of the water. At the high tide, the deeper levels are going to remain cool, so the tide's going to go out, and then the water level is going to sink, and then the water temperature is going to increase. And for salinity, the seawater is going to stay healthier, and it's going to be heavier, and it's going to have a higher salinity than the freshwater.
Humans are impacting this through direct impacts by filling, grading, removal of vegetation, building construction, and changes in the water levels and drainage patterns. Most disturbances that result in direct impacts to wetlands are controlled by state and federal wetland regulatory programs. Indirect impacts result from disturbances that occur in areas outside of the wetlands, such as uplands, other wetlands, and waterways. Common indirect impacts include influx of surface water and sediments, fragmentation of a wetland within a continuous wetland complex, loss of recharge area, or given changes in local drainage patterns. Given that most indirect impacts are beyond the authority of the state and federal wetland regulatory programs, wetland protection can be provided by a watershed management plan under local implementation.
Yep. Yeah, just go.
Alright.
As leaves and other things decay, because freshwater estuaries are a large source of carbon dioxide, so they need to be able to operate with little oxygen. So they increase their breathing at the water surface, so often you'll see fish come up to the surface and take a gulp of air.
Wetlands are inundated by water at least some of the time. They support plants adapted to water-saturated soil that are low in dissolved oxygen and have a high capacity to filter dissolved nutrients and chemical pollutants. Living organisms in wetlands include invertebrates, birds, herbivores such as crustaceans, carnivores such as otters and dragonflies. These organisms help purify the water and reduce peak flooding, draining, and fill in destroyed wetlands. There are four main types of wetlands: marshes, ponds, swamps, and peat bogs. Marshes are usually found near rivers, lakes, and tidal waters. Marshes are subject to periodic flooding, and the water level can change drastically in a short amount of time. The boundaries of marshes are not well defined, and in drought, a marsh can completely dry up. Ponds, a well-defined basin that is filled with stagnant water, ringed with vegetation. It is mainly fed by rainstorms and snowmelt, and losses in water come about through seepage and evaporation. In hot, dry months, parts of ponds may dry out, exploding mudflats. Swamps, essentially a wooded marsh. Unlike marshes, swamps can support trees, tall shrubs, herbs, and mosses. Swamps are covered with still or gently flowing water during the wet seasons. Estuaries are where rivers meet the sea. Partially enclosed saltwater and freshwater from runoff lakes and streams mix their nutrients and pollutants to form estuaries. Estuaries and coastal wetlands include river mouths, bay, inlets, sounds, coastal marshes, and mangrove forests. These ecosystems are extremely productive due to high nutrients given from rivers and nearby land. Tidal fluctuations that circulate nutrients rapidly in shallow waters allow the penetration of sunlight. Among the most productive biomes due to nutrients, complex networks of tidal channels, islands, natural levees, mudflats, salt marshes, and algae. Species here must be tough and have adapted to seasonal changes, as well as drastic daily changes that include seasonal tidal fluctuations, water temperature, salinity, and runoff of eroded soil sediments, as well as pollutions from civilization. Although these ecosystems have high productivity, their biodiversity is low due to all these stresses. Species that have adapted. Pickleweed is an example of a halophilic, salt-loving plant that tolerates the unique and consistently changing environment of salt marsh estuaries. This plant handles salt in two ways. As a salt excluder and a salt accumulator, some salt is filtered out at the roots by sodium-potassium pumps in the plant's cell membranes. Excess salt is pumped out by other cells, called storage cells, at the tips of the plant's jointed segments. Alkali plants are salt excretors. Special pores in the plants pump out salt through these leaves. As well as plants, many animals that live in estuaries must change their behavior according to the surrounding water salinity in order to survive. Oysters and blue crabs are good examples of animals that do this.